Welcome back, everybody, to Real Woman, Real Torah. We're in the middle of our podcast series called Finding Myself in Torah, where we're interviewing women from across the spectrum of Orthodoxy and hearing about their personal experiences of finding their own personal connection and place within Torah, and their perspectives about how, as a community, we can create that space for women. So I'm so honored to have Alex Fleksher here today. Alex is an educator, speaker, columnist, and so much more, activist in her community, and does a million things. I'm like looking at her bio and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. It's going to take too long to say all this. So you can kind of give your own intro if you want. And maybe to start, I would love for you to share a little bit about your educational experiences growing up and sort of how specifically your Torah education has evolved, or Torah learning has evolved over time.
Sure. Well, Hadassah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on. And you did neglect to mention fellow podcaster. So your question about, I guess, my Torah education and my journey. So my parents didn't join the Orthodox community until I was 12 years old. So I grew up with a little bit of, conservative Sunday school Jewish education. And then around that time when I had stopped Sunday school, Tuesday school, whatever it used to be called, I joined Torah Day School of Atlanta as a sixth grader. It was I'll step back. When I was in first grade, my parents put me actually into a community Jewish school. And at the time, my father wasn't Jewish. My mother was Jewish. So we were doing, Christmas and Hanukkah and the whole shebang. And I would come home on Fridays with a challah and talk about Shabbat. And I had a sitter and would sing Ashrei at the kitchen table. And I remember my mother started crying because she hadn't heard Ashrei since she was a young child growing up in South Africa. And they couldn't handle the cognitive dissonance of not raising me in a Jewish environment, but putting me in a Jewish school, that they actually pulled me out of Jewish day school,
Oh, wow.
fascinatingly. So then my formal education got picked up again when my parents joined the community when I was in sixth grade. And that was really interesting. I don't know how much is talked about or how common it is for, children of Bali Tshuva to enter a day school system from the public school system. But it was really challenging for me. This was like before the days where there was, accommodations made in learning and, scaffolding and all of,
Right.
our ways how we try to accommodate to the needs of different learners of different backgrounds. But I was thrown into a regular sixth grade class. I used to say with like all the kids who were singing, Uncle Moshe since they were 5, had no clue what was flying, could read Hebrew, but that was basically it. And we think about all the references that a teacher will make in the day, words in Hebrew, whatever. I was like, I remember I used to I used to shout out, translate that all the time, because I was like at such a disadvantage.
Yeah.
And it was really stressful. And the school did hire oh gosh, I'm really going far back. I think it just gives context, but the school did hire one of the female teachers to sit down with me in the morning, and we went through davening. Community. I still remember her name, Devorah Barusan. I see her as a speaker these days, and I actually want to reach out to her and be like, do you remember me? Like, I was that little girl who you sat down and you showed me how to daven and you taught me Moda Ani, I didn't know. And just that one-on-one, actually now that I'm reflecting on it, I think it's actually very meaningful. That one-on-one, number one, relationship with a female teacher, chavrusa style, if you will, just having that one-on-one interaction with her. And I was she was able to teach me on my level, was very meaningful. She was a role model of sorts
Wow.
to me. And through the years, it was always this evolution of, trying to catch up with my class, having definitely wonderful role models. This was in Atlanta in the 90s. I had Mrs. Miriam Fellman, who is now she's the founder of Timima High School in Atlanta. It was the first girls' school there. I didn't end up going there, but these are pillars of this community who I was zocha to be their students, and a very formative time. And in high school, I went to co-ed yeshiva high school. I was one of the what we call orthodorks, apparently, where we were the quote religious kids amongst reform conservative, and that environment can go one of two ways. For my friends who were FFB, grew up religious, this was okay, our turn to go through the back door with jeans underneath her skirt, and like go hang out with the boys. And like for me, I was really not interested in that because my whole journey was like I've left that reform conservative world. I've entered the Orthodox world, and I was on my own like Jewish journey trying to figure myself in that. So I would like ask myself, like, if I would do something like that, would that be like putting me on the path or off the path? And it was always very clear to me. I was very lucky to have like such clarity at a young age. But academically, slowly building. And I guess the big breakthrough for me was when I went on Mechlelet NCSY, which is a learning summer program in Israel on the Neve campus. That was going into, I feel like I want to say going into 12th grade, which is sort of late than the typical trajectory because then you're going to seminary after that. But that was like a big deal for me. I wasn't like fully, I wore short sleeves. I wasn't like fully CNS already. I did things very slowly. I had zero pressure from my parents in terms of my religious observance. But in terms of like, also role models have always been really important to me. So I would meet these like madrichot who had just come back from seminary, who dressed modestly, who were smart, who were going to college, who were, like learning in what did we call it? Baby Josh. I don't even remember base measure. I remember what it was called in that program, but like, it was this like model of someone who I had never met before, which really was instructive and important for me. And of course, peers that were like, this is cool. Like we like to learn. I had never experienced like Chavrusa style learning besides like whatever teachers would, say, okay, translate this Rashi together. But this was like, we were in the base measure of Neve. We had every morning we had like Chavrusa learning, and it was like, this is actually fun. I remember having that experience, thinking that like I'm like, okay, it used to be like Chumash class, Navi class in high school, but this was completely different. And it was the first time I was exposed to that type of learning and really loved it. But what I want to say here is I think that like, especially for women with our social inclinations, like Torah learning, I think is, and I think maybe this is for men as well, but I think for women is, particularly as a young person at that time, it wasn't just like reading a sefer, learning something in school. Like for the first time I experienced the impact of having peers that were role models as part of that process, as part of that formative process as well, both in my religious growth and in this concept that like, oh, it's not like a nerdy thing to do. This is actually for smart people, for motivated people, and this is a fun thing to do. So that was really transformative. I decided to go to the seminary that I went to because of the madricha that I had. I went to Darchei Bina. And I'll end this piece of the story because I know we have other things to talk about. You remember I told you like I was always on this journey to sort of like catch up with my peers. So I really pushed myself in seminary. I was so idealistic and so motivated and so driven. So I really pushed myself to like do the best I could do. So after that, I went to Stern. I got a degree in English, a master's in Jewish education from Israeli, and we could discuss like professional aspirations if you want as well. But those are some like formative moments I think that were important to me.
Wow, really interesting. Yeah, I think that's so like it's interesting the things that motivate us, to work hard and to achieve. And like I think the social part of it, of like I just need to catch up with everybody else and where everybody else is at, even if it was like in your mind, like it could be a lot of your peers actually weren't that advanced in their skills. But like to you, you were like, oh, but like I'm always have to be catching up, Yeah,
it's sort of that like when you're born with lack. So some people could use that as like, oh, I'm at disadvantage. Life isn't fair. I'm not as good as I'm never going to make it. And for me, it was like, that was what like built the grit that propelled me to motivate me.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. I want to talk more about, maybe we can go back to that later, because I like to first talk about people's like personal journeys and then get into like sort of what does this mean for like the community in general and all that. Sure. So maybe we can talk about that more later. Like how do we create that fire for, our girls who don't necessarily feel that lack, and feel like create that drive and that yearning to achieve in that way. But maybe first to talk a little bit more about you, like, is there anything else, I guess, as you grew into adulthood and started your career, and you clearly accomplished a lot in your career as well. Can you share a little bit about specifically within the realm of Torah and like how you found your own place or your own voice, within the realm of like Torah learning and teaching? Yeah.
Well, I would say so much of it came from growing up out of town in Atlanta, where everybody counted, like everybody mattered. And I think with our family, like joined the community when I was 12, and we were completely embraced, and like we were given clear messages that you are wanted and you matter here as now part of this, a member of this community. That like implanted in me, um, just like it wasn't a question. Like, of course, whatever I'm going to do is going to be in the Orthodox community specifically. I just felt like a very clear mission that that's what I had to contribute.
Mm.
When you are raised out of town, and like, and especially in Atlanta, it's just like such like a builders community. I can't describe it so much. Like so many role models of people that were building schools, building the shul. It just felt like that, and also certainly with NCSY, hugely formative, giving me those messages of like being a leader and, you know, fulfilling your potential in the community. So between those two experiences, it was very clear that like that would be my role somehow in like building the community.
Mm.
Um,
When you say
so
out of town, you mean like out of, because it's like usually when people say that, they mean like out of like the big communities in New York City.
yeah,
Basically.
Atlanta,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Atlanta's out of town.
Out of, right, meaning a town means like New York
Oh,
City,
for
basically.
those who aren't familiar, yes.
I also
Yeah.
grew up out of town, so it took me a while to figure out what that meant. So,
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta by no question is out of town, and it's changed so much since I was there. Like, obviously, less out of town now,
yeah.
but still out of town. So I had this question for me, like, you know, I'm a English. Yeah, I decided to major in English. That was clear for me. Like, I always knew I was a good writer. I was a good communicator from when I was younger. I knew I wanted to do something in that. But I felt like my calling was, well, I'll tell you how it started. I had an internship at Torah in London.
Mm.
I was like 20. I don't think of the summer when I was 20. Thinking I wanted to, my degree is in English communications. So like PR for like nonprofits, PR marketing for Jewish organizations, which is interesting because I'm sort of now moved into that currently. But anyway, and I remember like sitting at the desk, they asked me to like write up or their annual report. I don't think I was completely responsible for it, but I was doing some of their writing and editing for their annual report and writing about all of the programming that Aish was doing and having this like literal aha moment. I remember where the desk was. I remember the moment thinking, I don't want to be writing about these things. I actually want to be doing these things.
Mm.
No, I did not decide to become a kiruv professional from that.
Mm.
Although at that time I actually really wanted to marry someone like a kiruv rabbi. I was like very into that. I thought we would, but I ended up not. But definitely at that point I knew I wanted to go into teaching. So the question was, as an English major and as someone who loves English, should I be an English teacher or should I go into Limudei Kodesh, be a Judaic studies teacher? And it was always like, which one? And gratefully, you know, I decided to get my master's from Israeli and Jewish education. And then my first job, once I was married in Baltimore, was full-time teaching both English in the middle school and Judaic studies, which I was very grateful to have. Beth Tefillah, it's a community school in Baltimore. So I did that. I taught for like 10 years in Baltimore. We moved to Cleveland for my husband's medical residency, and then had the really interesting experience being hired by the most right-wing Beis Yaakov here in Cleveland, not for Limudei Kodesh, because they would never hire me because I was like, you know, had my master's from Israeli, even though my husband learned in the Neri School Kollel for 5 years, but like I was too out of the box teaching English. And that was like one of my most gratifying teaching experiences. I think the girls there were just sponges, and I had never taught like from girls before. And they are fabulous teachers, don't get me wrong, but I was one of the only people credentialed at my level there. So it was like an awesome experience. Stopped teaching because my husband finished residency, and I'm like, I don't need to work a day in my life again because my husband's earning money. Ha ha ha.
Famous last
And
words.
yeah,
Not when
exactly.
you're,
Then like
yeah, not when you're from and have to pay.
that's right.
Yeah.
Like the full tuition bill started coming in, and it was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's figure it out. Started teaching in some other schools. To cut a long story short, I think at that point I decided to really focus on some writing. I had written a piece that sort of went viral for Cross Currents, which is Rabbi Adlerstein, Yitzhak Adlerstein's blog. And that's when I like writing about communal Jewish issues, which led to a column in Mishpacha magazine and the main magazine. Because I'm like the person, I was always the kid who was like fascinated by like contemporary Orthodox issues and topics. And that was a really, I've sort of tapered down. I'm not focusing on my writing so much now, but like that's been a very exciting time for me. My column in Mishpach I was writing like pretty consistently for like 5 years.
Wow.
So yeah, so as you can see, just sort of like always been interested in contributing to the community however I could, even if I was like staying at home at that point, little kids, like there's a computer, there's a way that I can share share my message using media, which is what I got into. I got involved in starting a girls' high school, Haviva High School, which I'm really proud about.
Wow.
Yeah, so and communally also was involved with the Chizuk mission and starting like a Chizuk retreat for women that I'm still involved in, a co-founder of that, where we provide, day retreats and classes over the course of the year to give Chizuk and inspire and more informal learning, I would say, not like, the Chavrusa learning mission we could talk about, the differences in maybe what many women are looking for in terms of their inspiration. I'll stop now because I could go on and on. We haven't talked currently what I've been doing, but that was
Yeah,
sort
what are
of
you
like
doing currently? I want to hear.
okay,
You're
currently.
not doing your podcast anymore. You're not doing writing anymore. What are you doing?
Okay, fine.
Tell us.
So during COVID, I had just had a baby. I wasn't formally working. I was still writing for Mishpacha, and a friend of mine, Rivki Silver, reached out and she said, "Do you want to do a podcast with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, that's cool." This was like during COVID when people started coming up with their podcasts. I think we were like a little ahead of the curve, like just behind it, just catching the wave. And this was something that was always on my bucket list as a communicator, as someone who's passionate about education. I thought this would be really a way to, it's a form of adult education, really. Podcast the way is. And so at the time we called it Normal From Women. It's sort of like tongue in cheek, hopefully not insulting anyone, but this idea like we're just regular ladies, we're not the Rebbitzins. And that's really the beauty. I mean, you are a Rebbitzin, but the beauty of podcasting and also the downfall, which is another conversation, is, this grassroots bottom up inspiration. Yes, now anyone can take a mic and spew anything and influence people, and that's a danger there. But we sort of just like fell into this model of like, we're not Rebbitzins, we're just women that want to grow, want to learn, want to talk about the things that are on our minds as Orthodox women. So here's the mic and here's so that's evolved. We got taken on by Meaningful Minute. We're very grateful for a few years, and that evolved into DMC, Deep Meaningful Conversations. We did it for 5 years. We just closed that out. Loved it because this is like what you listen to when you're folding your laundry, when you're doing a carpool, and that's what women always said. Is they loved, like Rifki and I had the banter, we had the schmooze, we would talk about the topic. Before our podcast was topic based versus like people based, profiling a person. We wanted to profile a topic we were interested in. We'd find the right guests to discuss it. And we talked about, Jewish communal ideas, self-development, topics that we were just like talking about, issues, whatever it was. That's the kind of stuff that we did. And we released those every 2 weeks for 5 years. And it was such a highlight in our lives. We learned so much. Baruch Hashem was a very popular podcast. We had about 4,000 to 5,000 downloads an episode. And it was awesome. I see it as like really as a highlight of my life.
Got it. And what's now? No, I want to know what's now. Like what's after that?
So right now, for the past, I want to say 3 years, I keep forgetting to check the dates. I have been the creative director of a social media initiative called Faces of Orthodoxy. This is run by the Orthodox Union, the OU. That happened because I was not like a social media person. Of course, I utilize social media always to share my articles, to have conversations, sharing my podcast. There was a show on Netflix called My Unorthodox Life. Many people know about it. And the star of the show was my Judaic studies teacher. Let's do full circle back in Atlanta.
Wow, crazy.
Julia Hart, then Talia Handler, huge role model in my life. You should just know. I think you would appreciate this. Talking about these like women who impacted me. She was a BJJ graduate, got up there. She like had, I don't know, the old version of Julia Hart, whatever. Photographic memory.
Wow.
Brilliant. She taught us Jewish history, taught us Chumash. I mean, like the real deal, like on fire BJJ, you know, like no slits in your skirt and you can't go to movies and like, you know, the real basic hashkafa.
Wow.
But just as like she just was a special person and always dressed super stylish and ran like the simcha dancing. So she was one of those women who I think were important influences in my life. But when I saw that the show was coming out, and then I sort of saw what she was doing with the show, sort of like having left the building and then throwing a match behind it, you know, behind her shoulder and burning the building down. I felt that was really dangerous. I wasn't thinking about the outside world. I was thinking about the frum community, honestly, and that this is really going to weaken women in terms of watching this, and seeing Orthodox women in particular being degraded. So I was like, we need to do something. So I was like, let's start this social media campaign. Is it going to work? I have no idea. I'm not an influencer, but I had this idea, hashtag my Orthodox life, and encouraging people to make a post on any platform and share your Orthodox life and be honest about it. But just like tell the world and tell yourself and tell other people why you're here, why you're proud of it. You can talk about what you struggle with too, that's fine, but just like represent yourself, because I felt this was really an example of misrepresentation of Orthodox women, Orthodox Judaism. And that like, that talk about lighting on fire, that lit on fire. That
yeah, I mean, that was everywhere. I remember that.
Yeah. And that was crazy. Like that was like a moment where it was like, it's a very cool experience to have like a viral moment like that. Like papers were calling me, USA Today interviewed me and Julia Hart in the same article. It was wild. Wow. It was wild and it was really cool. But like for once there was like this positivity on social media, which is also cool. And I was so proud of how many women stood up on like every platform. Like the Hasidish women were like overtaking LinkedIn. Like it was really cute, you know? And just like women from, it's so cute. I have a screenshot of the grid when you search my Orthodox life on Instagram. You'd see all the posts that would come up with that hashtag, and there would be there was this one shot of a picture of a woman in a tank top next to like a Hasidish woman with her huge family, and both of these women posted. Both of them identified as Orthodox and both had a story to share. So it was like a really special moment. And at that time, you know, I obviously was like getting all these calls and interviews. It was really wild and trying to monitor the account and give feedback to everyone who was posting. But the OU called me and they're like, what can we do to support this? Because they felt it was a moment. I was working with them and their PR team to like have articles written by Orthodox women to be put in the, you know, in the press and just, you know, to share our stories. And then when the whole thing died, as all viral moments do, I don't know, was it 2 weeks later? I think it lasted 2. You know, they came back and they're like, we've learned from this experience that we need to be telling our stories as Orthodox Jews. We represent ourselves. Could you, you know, work with us to create a social media campaign in order to tell the stories? I was like, yes, let's do this. So that's how Faces of Orthodoxy was born. I think we launched, I want to say 2021, but it sounds ridiculous. I don't know. I don't know. I have to look to double check. But we've been doing this ever since. Every week we profile a new person. Each season, it lasts about 8 weeks. Each season is in a different location in the United States. We did do a special season 10 in Israel or in the beginning of the war. But, and we feature about 8 individuals from that particular city. We really look for like a diverse group of Orthodox Jews who have different types of stories to tell, different types of professions, different, you know, religious backgrounds, all ages and stages. And it has been an amazing story. We have an amazing journey. We have like photographers. So anyone who's into like the women in pictures thing, we've really done some beautiful representation of Orthodox women as well. And it's been like really a passion project that has turned into a job for me that I love very dearly. So that's what I've been busy with.
Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. I feel like you've really created change in so many ways and so many like really like I feel like you really have your finger on the pulse of like what the community needs in terms of like yeah, like the kind of you know, like inspiration and like impact we need in the modern age, and like that's incredible. Okay, maybe let's go to let's talk about like, so just to kind of contrast like the education that you had, and then like let's say the education that say like your daughters or daughter.
I have 2 daughters.
I think you have at least one daughter. Okay, 2 daughters are getting. What do you see as like the differences Can you comment on like what do you see as a sort of like, we talked a little bit about like sort of the advantage you had in terms of like having that gap and like feeling the need to fill it, and what disadvantages did you have, and yeah, maybe you can like compare a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the community you're in now and the community you grew up in.
Sure. So if anyone is listening who is a Baal Tshuva, I don't consider myself a Baal Tshuva because I was 12, but in many ways I sort of was, because like half of my childhood I did not grow up in the Orthodox community. So anyone who's a Baal Tshuva can relate to the differences of growing up, choosing something for your own, and then raising children that you've chosen their quote unquote lifestyle for them. Now obviously our children choose for themselves as well. But in terms of raising them within at least making efforts to raise them within a frum community, with hopefully the outcome that we hope, which is that they should stay in the community. It's a really interesting experience. Part of why it works for someone who is a Baal Tshuva is, like I was saying before, like the choice is yours. You're going on this journey, you're defining this journey. I reference this. Nobody pressured me to do anything. In fact, I remember my mother, I like had stopped wearing pants or something, and my mom was like, "Oh, you look so cute in jeans," and I was like, "No, Mom, no, don't buy me the jeans."
Yeah, totally different experience. Yeah,
like, I don't know. My mother was like also on her own journey. It took her a while to like adopt everything, and that I think is how it should be, because it has to come from you. If it's like, it's just a very unusual experience for a teenager to like have that. So, but what we learn, I think, and the lesson from that for chinuch is like, somehow, even though we're making choices for children in terms of the educational systems they're put into and the hashkafic worlds they're in, they somehow need to maintain this sense of choice and voice in their own journeys, right? And I don't know if I can give you any practical ways that I do this or fail to do this, but I know that is so important, that like our kids in the system, in our educational system, still need to take ownership of their own journeys. Ideally, we want them to have their own journey for growth and on the path, and that they're making their choices, to continue to grow. But it doesn't always happen that way, as we know, our kids are making choices the other way. But that is just reality, is like that teens need choice.
I guess like you were describing how like you really had this like deep drive to like sort of catch up, so to say, which probably was somewhat socially driven. But then you like described like going to this program, the NCSY program, and like discovering this like love of learning through this like base medrash environment that you were in and things like that. And I feel like a lot of ways you really like discovered this for yourself. So there was like a real sense of like ownership and like personal investment. And do you see that in like, let's say like girls who are growing up and like we sort of become like, used to this, like we're just educated and we got this Torah education. And is there that same drive to like achieve and to grow and to develop in our learning? Are there, I guess, also like other limitations? Like maybe also like, I think also like sometimes I see with like Baal Tshuva, it's like you join a frum community and all of a sudden like, while you're still on your Baal Tshuva path, so to say, it's almost like there's more like space and opportunity to explore in different ways. And like once you're in a frum community, there's more of like this narrow mindset around like where you can or can't be. So like, I guess maybe talk about that a little bit. Like,
sure. Okay. So I would say like when I'm going to speak mainly. So I have 5 kids, 2 girls. One is in 7th grade. She's not reached that point that she is like appreciating the Limuzei Kodesh part, the learning part of school. Is she going to get there? I don't know. I don't know if that's like in her cards, if like that's her personality or what. Please God, I wait her to go on her own journey. I'm going to use my oldest daughter as an example because she went through the system and she came back from seminary this past summer. This is her first year out of seminary. I found the essential best practices of her educational experience was amazing role models of teachers, which also is so important to me and something that was important to me in school. But when I say role models of teachers, one of her favorite teachers is like a 75-year-old Rebbitzin, like from the old, tells the original Yavna Masorah, like really old school, that would go and like it turns out and to like the young Kolo wife, you know what I mean? But like the whole gamut of like all different types of women with all different types of teaching styles. In high school, she would have multiple chavrusas with her teachers, where she would go to their homes after school and would learn in small groups with her teachers. Like, to me, I'm like, is that a success or what? That like you built such relationships with your teachers and such a beautiful love for Torah and for Torah learning that outside of school you would go to their homes and they would
Wow.
continue to teach.
Yeah.
So I like so grateful for this. Like, this is like when I look on my journey, I'm like, I couldn't have asked for more. Did she go to Mechlelet and CSY? Did she follow my footsteps? No, she went down the Beis Yaakov, I would say again, community Beis Yaakov track. Did she end up in seminary like everybody else in the same types of seminary? Yes. Like what, but like again, she's a smart girl. She has like a certain natia, a certain leaning towards this. She fit in very well in this. But it's not every single girl this is going to speak to. And I'm very concerned about reaching all of our students. You know what I mean? This is not every girl is going to go to learn by her teacher's house on a Thursday night,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's how I would answer the question. But yeah, she had everything I didn't have. You know what I'm saying? In terms of the skills, in terms of the hashkafa, in terms of the breadth of knowledge. I mean, I'm so grateful that she's had what she was given.
Yeah.
And
I think
now,
you said,
like,
yeah.
yeah, please.
No, just like you said, like having like very strong female role teachers and role
Yes.
models is like a huge thing in terms of creating that passion and that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her
Totally.
class also had this reputation, I don't know, of like her principal would call them the matanos, which is like the presents. It's like she happens to have a very strong class. Listen, but like, and that was like sort of the reputation. You also sort of like live up to it. Like if you know you're in the best class, you're the strong class, you're gonna live up to
Right.
it. I just want to like give voice to how challenging it is to be a teenager in this day and age, a from teenager in this day and age. It is
Yeah.
so hard, and like it's not simple. It's
Yeah.
not simple, and everyone has different experiences with school. Everyone has bad experiences to some extent with a teacher that said the wrong thing or looked at them the wrong way, or worse. And it's just, it's not for the faint of heart, parenting and like putting your kids through the school system. I've had a variety of experiences, and I just wanted to speak to that. It's just, there are positives and there are negative experiences that parents and children absolutely have.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit, because you mentioned seminary, and we've spoke about this beforehand, about
Yeah.
sort of like this double standard that there is sort of with like the education that we give our girls like through their elementary and high school years, and like you said, like Beis Yaakov's, like a lot of them give like really really high level like learning opportunities
Yeah.
for girls, and going into seminary as well. And then sort of like the question is like kind of what happens after. Like, do we see this as like a lifelong pursuit for our girls or women, or not? And sometimes like the language we use to talk about their learning after seminary can kind of like send a certain message. So yeah, maybe talk a little bit about that, like what that sort of, the way we as a community culturally sometimes perceive girls learning up through seminary and after. Where does
Yeah.
that come from? And is there a way we can shift that? Yeah.
I love that. Love that discussion. So let's just put on the table that for those who may not be familiar, like when we're talking about the Beis Yaakov world, where, Gemara learning is not something that's normative. Yes. Like as my daughter says, like the 75-year-old teacher who went to, if those who are familiar with like, the Tells Tells Cleveland is a major yeshiva here, or a Yavna seminary. These are old institutions. For sure, she like sat down in front of a Gemara. Like she's learned Gemara. Like there's no question, such
Wow,
like
so
a high
interesting.
level. Yeah, so like you're gonna get like the the big Rebbitzins or whatever it is, have opened up a Gemara. However, learning Gemara formally is not part of our system. And that when you mention seminary, it's like if you are a top girl in 12th grade, a top Beis Yaakov girl, the whole thing is like you're going to, we use this term, academic seminary. So like, isn't that interesting? The quote, best girls are being fed into academically rigorous seminaries. Now, if she doesn't want, no one's forcing her, if she doesn't want that and she wants a more relaxed environment, of course, there are Beis Yaakov stripes for every type of girl. But like, the BJJs,
Yeah.
this is the height of academics in terms of being rigorous, having high expectations, inside learning. So I think that's really interesting. So like, you're in the honors track in high school. You're taking like the hardest, like I know my daughter, the principal taught like the honors parsha. She had to like prepare the parsha with however many mafarshim every week. She was like breaking her head over it, like really intense. And then you go to like this intense academic seminary. And then the question is like, now what in terms of lifelong learning? So is the expectation that girls are going to have like a chavrusa like when they come home from seminary? Is that like feminist, which like, anything feminist leaning would not be looked upon properly? But wait a minute, they were like sitting and learning all, in seminary classes, all different types of modes of learning. I don't even know. I don't think there's not like base measure. I never even asked her in seminaries either. I think that's like some chavrusa learning. I don't even know how it works. I don't know. But is that something that's going to continue? So I can just speak for my daughter. I mean, who doesn't mind me sharing. Like she continues to learn formally. She learns with her teachers. Has a few chavruses with my husband, which I think are so adorable. I probably should join them, and I don't. But certain mishabur, certain halachic things she wanted to focus on. So she learned mishabur with my husband. They have like a hashkafa chavrus on something that she wants to work on. So beautiful because she loves cracking open a sefer. She has some Tanakh things that she's continuing in process. She's learning and working on. If you love it and that love has been engendered in you, and it's not like, oh, like we had all these academic expectations in high school and now I'm sorry, in seminary, and then like, oh, we just stopped learning. It's not that. It's not an academic endeavor. It's something that you really enjoy learning and doing. You're going to want to do it properly. Mm-hmm. So that's what I see now. Now, what is the hashkafa though once you're married? And that leads into the essence of your question. And like for the rest of us, I really think the hashkafa here is once you're married and you have responsibilities to your family and you start having children and you have a job or whatever it is, that is your primary tafkid. And that's your primary purpose in terms of the role that you need to fill and the job that you need to do. However, is learning something that's going to fill your tank. It's something that you need to continue to, of course, maintain your ruchnius, or obviously maintaining ruchnius is essential, but let's say sitting down and having a chavrusa or sitting down opening up a sefer is the way that you're going to maintain your ruchnius. Like that, you need to do that to fill your tank. Then of course one needs to do it. But it's in terms of like tafkid purpose, there's a very clear distinctions in the Beis Yaakov world is that there is no obligation for a woman in Talmud Torah. So she's not obligated like a man. If it's something that is good for you and your ruchnius is part of your own desires and your own personality, is important that you continue it, then one should do it. But if one had to, of course, choose between you have only a certain amount of hours a day and you're taking care of your family and your home and your work, those obligations or responsibilities would come first. So I think for a young woman like in shidduchim in this world, I think that is the focus of what that next stage is, and then how to fit in these ways of filling in their tank once they've, entered that new stage of responsibility.
Do you think there are gaps in the community for where women might feel like disconnected or like feel like they don't belong within the world of Torah?
Yeah, absolutely. I know for myself, if I could just give some examples, I really struggled with this as a newlywed. And because I always loved learning and I loved being in shul. So like first kid came, I wasn't in shul. You get so overwhelmed. I was working full time, had a baby. Like I just didn't have the headspace to like incorporate learning. Let alone, I had to you still have to focus on like your own observance. Forget about learning for a second. How about davening? How about like still, juggling Torah observance and halachic observance with your new roles? Like even that is just a huge thing. And I remember like speaking to Rebbe and she's like, oh, this is going to date me. Just listen to a tape when you're cooking. And I was like, are you joking? Like, I'm going to listen to Rabbi Akiva Tatz while I'm cooking. Like my brain is just like not there. Like I couldn't, like there was only so much I could do and that I couldn't do. And that's why, funnily speaking, the podcast I think has been like really that, like it's about like providing chizuk and opportunity for a woman to think about, and things that are relevant to their lives as Jewish women while they're cooking and just like keep their, but let's be honest, like it's a real, I just find it to be a real struggle. And that is why, like with the Chizuk retreat, we provide learning opportunities for women. What we're finding is what our women want is they want to be intellectually stimulated to an extent, but they're really looking for chizuk. And that is why this organization started by Barry Feld called the Chizuk Mission. She runs trips to Israel, but I'm involved as a volunteer in our local events. Life is really hard. I think there are few women who can, and maybe it's just, I'm speaking from my experience, who can maintain that sense of like, I'm opening up a sefer right now. I'm continuing my chavrusa. I think Nachyomi, started by the OU, has actually been very transformative in giving women opportunity. You don't have to learn inside. You could just listen to the podcast version. But like, okay, let's open up our texts. Let's open up the Navi and like, let's actually learn in the Navi, and you will get the chizuk. You will get the inspiration. You don't have to have the fluffy inspirational speaker to get the inspiration. It's actually right here. I think that's been like really transformative to remind us that and make that like a thing again. But we find that women are really wanting speakers that light their fires, that remind them of their purpose. We have offered different speakers. We never do inside textual learning. We have offered some speakers that are more intellectual, that are more like source-based, no source sheets, but more source-based types. And we find that the woman that's their type gravitate towards that, like a certain type of woman. But the average woman that we're dealing with wants to, like, if they're going to leave their families to go to a day retreat, they just need something that's going to fill up their tank quick and manageable bites. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Easier bite. So that's my experience. It's that like I'm not. I mean, like very intellectual women are going to be continuing to be learning more formally, but I think our plates as Orthodox women are extremely full. I think the problem is more women are not filling their spiritual buckets enough. Mm-hmm. I think can be conversations here about a decline in religious observance once we enter the motherhood and marriage stage. Yeah. So to me, I'm more concerned about that than if women are still having chavrusas and, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you spoke a lot about like, when you transition into marriage and motherhood and raising a family and how the challenges of continuing like any sort of like serious textual learning, like what you were describing your daughter is doing at that stage of life, and it can be really challenging. And often like sort of those more like bite-sized like chizuk opportunities is more what people want and need. So I'm curious, like, we live in an age now where many women, women have opportunity to advance secular education, to like advance their careers in all kinds of ways. How do you think that might impact the relationship that women have to their Yiddishkeit? Maybe that, and in general, like other influences of secular feminism, how does that influence our relationship to Yiddishkeit? And do you think that should impact the way we approach women's learning?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I believe that was Rev Soloveitchik who, when he gave his hetzer to teach women Gemara, and now I forgot which school it was in Boston, in the high school, and that was part of the argument. It's that our girls are being trained and taught and educated on such a high level in the secular world. How could we not afford them the opportunity to learn Gemara, to learn this whole treasure trove of wisdom in our own tradition? And I know that's absolutely an argument there. I think in terms of, getting the higher degrees, entering the secular workforce, again, I'm less concerned about if they are having the parallel of that in their Torah learning than if they are becoming disconnected from the community, feeling a sense of isolation from the community, because number one, they're not davening in the shul like the men are. They're not making time to socialize with other women. We as adults need role models. As adults need connections. We can't underestimate the power of that in terms of our own religious growth. That continues into our adulthood. The importance of sisterhood and other women boosting us and inspiring us. So that can go by the wayside. And when we're in a secular work environment, let's just say if that's what we're referring to, the challenges of being strong in your Judaism, of not, okay, it's all right if I do this, I'm gonna, it's okay if I stop covering that. It's so easy to slip. So again, those to me are my primary concerns, is how we stay strong in our Yiddishkeit and our hashkafas and our observance, less than am I also getting the opportunities to learn the Torah on such a high level as I did in graduate school.
And
now maybe one could argue, if they continue their learning, that would enable them to stay more inspired. I argue there's so much learning to do. Does that mean you have to learn on like a super high level of learning to achieve that? There are other things. There's just like other ways that we can continue to get chizuk. I'm not sure that rigorous learning is necessary, or even, as I said, I like use brain space is something that women are going to be are going to want to prioritize. If they want to, of course they should. Absolutely. Everyone has, I like to use this term of love languages. Like we all have our love languages in Avodas Hashem. Some people like the entertainment is like chesed. They're like the women that are like running Bikur Cholim behind the scenes, giving people meals. That's how they're staying connected. Other women, it's like, yes, I need to have my chavrusa. Like I need to sit down and learn with the sefer. There's no right or wrong. But the point is like, this is your language. Do not let that love tank, if those who are familiar with the reference, go empty. We have an achayos, we have a responsibility that we have to keep it filled in whatever way works for you. That's enables you to stay strong in your Yiddishkeit, that you're not watering it down as life becomes more complicated.
Right. Can I push back on this a little bit? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I guess my question is this. It's like, let's say when it comes to like the world of like secular education and career paths and all of that, like we didn't really know what women were capable of or wanted or what their interests were until we created the opportunity, right? So like we created the opportunity for women to go to law school and become lawyers, and all of a sudden turns out more than 50% of the law school now is female, and women are great lawyers and do just as well in that field, and we never knew because we never gave them the opportunity. And I think when it comes to Torah education, like, do you think there's a parallel there where like if we don't create a framework, and obviously like you said, like in a lot of ways there might be some limitations in some schools on what girls can or don't learn, but I think in a lot of ways we do have like relatively, advanced education in a lot of our girls' schools. But it's up to a certain point and we stop it at a certain point, and then after that there's less of a focus. And if we're not creating a framework and like an opportunity for women to invest in those areas of learning, is there a lost like sort of potential there for women feeling super engaged and a real sense of belonging within their Yiddishkeit through Torah as an avenue, the same way, for example, men do, right? So like in the average community, you have like multiple daf yomi shiurim for men, and you have like so many different opportunities for them to engage along in so many different ways. And even the layman, I'm not talking about the rabbis, right? I'm talking about like the average working man. Like it's like normative in like Orthodox community for them to like have a myriad of different choices and opportunities for them to be able to engage in learning in different ways. And again, just having those opportunities like gives them the chance to like discover their love and their excitement and their passion, and also creates a sense of community, by the way, because like when you have shiurim where you're coming together. So I guess like is creating that framework and creating those opportunities something that can sort of give us insight into another avenue that women could feel really deeply connected to Yiddishkeit.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, and I really like your parallel to what's happened historically for women in the secular world. It's that when they're being socialized to believe that this is what you're happy being, the stay-at-home mom, the 1950s wife, you wouldn't be happy because you don't have these opportunities to do anything outside of that. Then that's how we're socially conditioned to feel that we're being happy, and I think about that a lot. I would say, let's use this Naomi example by the OU.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example. I never would think that would fly. Like, according to everything that I'm saying, like, women are gonna, like, be interested in, like,
sitting and learning
that. Like, women, they're space. I mean, I can give you all my arguments.
Right.
That is a great example of, like, sorry?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a wildly popular initiative. Women are, like, on fire from it. And that is because that was an opportunity that was created. So they created it, like if you build it, they will come. They created it. It became an opportunity, it became an option. And then the women who were interested came and they have come in droves. So I wouldn't want to limit anyone. I do think it's important to create opportunities, create initiatives, to create a menu. And if one is seeing that it's just not picking up steam in your own community, I think that's sort of what we saw with the Chizuk retreat is we saw what women typically wanted. So
Yeah.
that's what we're
And
providing.
you have to answer the need.
But I
Yeah.
think there needs to be an option of learning opportunities for women. And if again, if people see like this isn't working, people don't want it. Okay, so you tried, you offered it. But honestly, like what, but maybe let's think about why do they not want it? Maybe that's how they've been conditioned to think and socialized to think that they don't want it. But maybe if they had opportunities from when they were younger
Right.
to want it. I mean, these are thoughts I absolutely have, and I think they're 100% valid. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, when we say socialize, it's not necessarily like it sounds like very notorious, but it's not. Meaning like we've been socialized in the sense that we emphasize the value of family and focusing on family, and that's an absolutely amazing, incredible thing. But the point
Right.
is that like there might be, like you said, if there's this sense of like disconnect and like lack, just like a lack of like passion or investment or feeling like Yiddishkeit is mine, like maybe we need to say like, oh, perhaps the absence of like more in-depth learning is contributing to that in some way, especially when we live in an age when like women have so much access to that in other ways. Yeah.
Agreed.
Maybe
Can I
it's-
ask you,
Yeah.
Hazaz,
Yes.
I'm just curious, like for you with what you created, like did you find it
Yeah.
was that like if you built it will come type of experience? Like women didn't
Yeah.
even realize how much they wanted the learning
Oh, for
opportunities
sure.
that they
For sure.
yeah.
For sure. For sure. And I think there's like some things where like literally like that where like I didn't even expect to be that many women who were coming, and there's some things where it's more
Wow.
like some more like I guess high level, like even things let's say like Gemara learning or things like that. Oh, sorry, one second. My mom is visiting. She's finishing a phone call. Okay. What was I saying? So there's also been like things like higher level Gemara learning or things like that, which is a little bit more niche. And I wouldn't say we're getting like, thousands of women come, running to learn it. But the women who have come, a lot of them are people who like never would have thought they wanted it. Like they never would have been like, oh, I'm really interested in Gemara. I'm really interested in like this very abstract like study of Hasidus or whatever it is that we're teaching. And then when they, for some reason, they fall into it, and when they're there, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I never even knew this was like an area of Torah that I would ever love or ever appreciate. And it gives them this like drive and excitement in their Yiddishkeit that they didn't even know was possible. And it just came from opening the opportunity. And again, they weren't looking for it. If someone would have asked them, what do you need to like get excited about Yiddishkeit? They never would have said a Gemara share, or they never would have said like higher level text-based learning. Like that's not what they would have said. And then like even here in LA, I started this like these Sunday, I partnered with a shul here, and we started these like Sunday like women's kailel type of thing, where it's like basically like women come, we have like brunch, we have a childcare available, and it's just basically chaversa learning. We have like these booklets with like sources, and people learning chaversas. And my first event, I didn't write on the flyer chaversa because I knew no one would come. I wrote chaversa learning or like text-based learning, anything like that. It was just like pre-Rosh Hashanah learning, just like chill. And then a bunch of women showed up, and I was just like, okay, I know, I'm sorry, I tricked you guys into it. We're doing chaversa learning, but it's gonna be amazing. Just try it out. And like tons of women came over to me after, and they were like, I never would have come if you told me in advance it was going to be text-based chaversa learning, but we love it. And like they all came back. And I think sometimes we just need to like create the opportunity. You know what I mean?
No, I mean
Yeah.
you're you're making me like challenge some of, I don't know, question some of the things that I even said to you, because like when I'm thinking about the programming we do in our community, like maybe we need to just sort of trick them, you know what I mean? Like, you're coming and then wait a minute, you're gonna love this, and like
Do
let's see if
both.
you love it
I
or
don't
not.
think you
But
should. Well, I don't think you should not do what you're already doing. I feel like we need to do both. Like
no, of
I
course,
feel like the more the better. Like
of course.
like like we should also be doing
Yes,
those like more low key, like just chizuk. Like that's also really important. Like I don't think we should
yes,
be canceling that
it's
for
true.
sure. Not. I just think I think both. Like the
It's
more
true. But I
options we
just
can give
think
people, the better.
about, so I'm thinking about like all the limitations, like everything that goes through our head, why we might not be interested in exploring a different avenue of learning that we're like not used to it, And I think on one hand, it could be, I think we as women sort of typecast ourselves like,
Mm.
oh, like I'm not intellectual, or that's for really smart people, you know what I mean? That's not my thing. Or like, or even, of course, hashkafic limitations. I mean, there's what to say about why someone would not be interested in going to a Gemara class. I'm not saying that everyone should try it out. I personally never have tried it out. It's something that I might
Yeah.
really like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I just think like it's interesting to explore like why it's so hard. And I think also one just really basic element, how when you talk about exercise and it's going to make you feel so good and it's going to be so good for me, but like the hardest part of exercise is getting off of the couch.
Yeah.
Like to make a change in our lives when so often our lives are so hectic,
Yeah.
taking care of our children and every child with a different issue and like
Yeah.
we're so overwhelmed with life. And then to think like, am I really going to make a change? Am I going to push myself and like go to a class that could be life changing, but I don't even know if it could be or not because I'm
Yeah.
like so stuck in my Dalit Amos, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think also just going, talking about like sort of the way we perceive ourselves. Like, I'm not an intellectual. I'm not a Rebbitzin. I'm not
Yeah.
a whatever. But I kind of going back to what you were saying before, because I feel like for a lot of women who feel that way now, it's like they may have been like super academic in high school or in seminary, and or even like maybe immediately after seminary, like setting up their chavrusos and stuff, and then something happens down the line. And I
Right.
remember we were actually talking about this when we had that conversation. You were saying how like even like culturally in the community, like people when like let's say your daughter coming out of seminary will say, oh yeah, like I'm learning this safer or that safer. People will look at it as like kind of weird, like you're learning a safer, like you're having this
Right. Who does
chavrusa, like
that?
who does that? And like in seminary, everyone's doing that, right? It's funny because I feel like I have so many
Exactly.
memories. What was that?
Hadassah, it's sort of like, but if you do it after seminary, that must mean you're a feminist.
Right, and so we all, and I feel like so many things are like that, like so many things that like we did in seminary that were like so normal. Even like I remember like the place where we used to learn in seminary was we called it the Zal, right? And I feel like we would call like a regular place like after seminary a Zal, people would be like, "Is that too feminist?" Right? And like
Exactly.
even things
You're,
like
that's a double standard for sure. That's not fair.
yeah, and like a lot of things like things that like sort of these sort of like we sort of held ourselves to a certain standard in seminary of like this is what our Yiddishkeit looks like,
Yeah.
and we're gonna take it super seriously and take our learning super seriously, take ourselves super seriously, and then like it's sort of this expectation that after that you kind of like go into real life and kind of let that all go, and part of that's
Yeah.
just inevitable. Like we're no longer in this cocoon of learning and
Yeah.
davening and all that. But is there a way in which we can like shift our culture so that we see like this commitment to learning as a lifelong thing? And I think I think the other thing is that there's this sense of like, okay, after seminary, even if you're not married and have kids yet, it's like we want to prepare you for that path. So if we kind of like prioritize this like intensive commitment to learning like when they come out of seminary, and it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen when they have kids, and it's going to be this like disappointment, like we kind of wouldn't want to go there. Yeah, what do you think about that culture
Yeah. I
and
mean,
yeah.
I think it happens sort of like on a micro level, like a personal level, when in peer groups we see that my friend is like still having a chavrusa, and then this other girl calls me to have a chavrusa over the phone, and like girls need to understand they should do it for themselves, but the impact that they can make by being role models on their peers, by continuing it and making it normative that this is what we continue to do
Totally.
after seminary, if
Yeah.
they want to
Yeah.
if they want to, and if that speaks to them. So that's on the micro level. And on the macro level, I am so inspired by women like you, Hadassah, by women who are creating these opportunities in our communities, both on a local level and on a national level, where you are giving such a strong message to the next generation. Like, we're mothers, we have multiple responsibilities, but this is something that we are continuing. This is something that is important, that we are investing in our own spirituality. We're investing in our own need to continue to learn Torah. And like, just by doing that, you're doing it for your peers, but like, don't forget about the huge impact and message that gives to the younger generation, that this continues when you move on to the next stage of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like again, it's not so much about the like hashkafic issues of like which parts of Torah can we learn or can't we learn. I feel like each community for themselves, whatever their hashkafa is, just like finding the area of Torah where you can.
Yeah,
I think
and
it's really
I
like a
mean, I'm really
commitment,
happy.
Yeah.
I'm happy to speak about that. Like, we met, the two of us met at
Yeah.
the Orthodox Torah Leadership
Yeah. Women's
Conference,
Torah
right?
leadership, yeah.
Right, Women's Torah Leadership, and where that was a little bit out of my comfort zone, where such an amazingly diverse group of women, where I'm not coming from the world where it's normal for women to learn Gemara. and seeing women who are like exceptionally educated in the secular world, as well as in there are various degrees in Torah leadership and Torah education. Like it's just so different from what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And I really respect what you just said. Now is that like every woman is coming from their own place,
Yeah.
and like to respect the communal standards that are different in every community. And just because one woman might not be learning inside, because that's just, or let's say honest, let's just say Gemara, that is not her Masorah, is not normative in her community. That like respect that everyone is speaking their language, what is available to them often, and what works for them, and respecting the communal norms of their community. But everyone with the same goal in mind, which is ideally to like connect to Hashem and connect to His Torah. Yes, do I sometimes wonder if my Beis Yaakov daughter, who's super smart, had the opportunity to learn Gemara, or was in a different schooling system, how that would turn out for her? Would she have loved it? Would I have loved it if I was exposed to? Sure. But there is, like, we use this word socialization, and I'm not using it in a bad way.
Yeah.
This is how it is. Choose paths for our children, and we choose paths for ourselves. If you want to be really creative and really, open-minded and be like, I chose this path, but I'm going to include this, and I'm going to add Gemara learning to it. I'm going to be myself. That's great. I have nothing against that. But like at the end of the day, often, this is the communities that we live in. We do choose communities with particular hashkafas, and there's some things you're gonna like, and there's some things you're not gonna like.
And there's like benefits and drawbacks of every community, like
exactly.
yeah.
And some and like again, you can like make individual choices within your family that you're gonna prioritize something that may not be culturally normative, and that's fine. That's great. But I just think it's important to understand and appreciate those nuances. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my thoughts about that.
Yeah, I guess like my personal feeling is that like have this sense that like it's a priority, and it's a essential value for women to feel that they can like Torah learning is a lifelong pursuit that they can be committed to, and they can invest in it in like a really deep way, and that they can feel that like the world. So I feel like just like culturally, it's like you're at a Shabbos meal, and like I don't know if this happens in your community, where like the men are kind of having this discussion about the parsha or about some Torah topic, and like the women are kind of on the other side having some sort of like mundane conversation. Like even just things like that, where like this sense of like that's not our world, that's not like our conversation to have. Like shifting that to me, I feel like is something that is across the board, no matter what hashkafa you come from. Like that, all of us can embrace that as a value, as like Torah being something that women feel is essential to their Yiddishkeit and a place that they belong.
Yeah, I have a story for that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
absolutely gentle views on like Torah ownership. There's like
Okay.
no question. I
Yeah.
mean, I totally see that. I totally agree. And it doesn't make any sense, like you said, because they're coming from like academic seminaries where it's like you have ownership, but
Yeah.
then what do you mean? Like this is like a man's thing? Why isn't it a woman's thing? Why do I have to feel that like I'm being feminist? If anyway, so I belong to a Young Israel shul. The rabbi is Neri Yisrael, a Neri Yisrael rabbi, so it's a very interesting, and it's a community shul. And we have a Torah journal. My friend Sarah Rudolph is the editor, and her whole thing is that like this is open to everybody in the community. And the first year, she's like, I really want you to write for it. And I'm like, oh, this is up my alley. Like, I'm super excited to write, an essay for this. And the first journal was published, and it was about, I don't want to say 50-50 men and women, but maybe like 60% men, 40% women, like pretty good.
Okay.
And again, this is not out of like feminist things that like women must be represented. It was like there are women here who really are candidates and would really contribute, just like there are men here. And so whoever wants to write can write, and this is who turns up. And someone in the show got upset about it. I'm sure he's not the only one, but someone was pretty vocal about it. Like, what is this? This is like a feminist journal. Like, why are there half women writing? Because it's just, I guess it's not so common. And like that makes me sad. That makes me sad. And I'll tell you something. I wrote a piece, and my husband's chavrusa, who is a doctor, we had a Shabbos meal, and he's like, wow, like yours is really good. He's like, how do you know how to write like that? Like, how do you know how to do that? And I'm like, I wanted to turn around to him and be like, how do you know how to like sew someone's arm back together?
Oh my God.
It was just like shock that like little me, who has a master's, by the way, in Jewish education, who's taught high school Judaic studies, could write an entry in a Torah journal, like this like shock. And so yeah, so that way I'm like a little feminist, because I'm like yes, the men should read this and know that like Mrs. Fleksher from Shul can write a piece like this. And by the way, the yeah, I'll say that my piece was better than a lot of the men's pieces. And that, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, that's like, why can that needs to be normative? That needs to be normative.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any, oh, I don't know what people think is not serious. You're putting yourself out there. Blah, blah. I don't know what people think. Or it's just like, it's just misogyny. I have no idea. But like, that can't be this way in 2025.
Well, my
Like,
feeling is that
women,
like it comes from like again like in like the original halachic source, it's like women don't have an obligation to learn Torah and men do, and that leads to like okay,
right,
so
right.
like there's more of a priority for men learning and not less for women, so that kind of can lead to this sense of like that is sort of like a man's sphere and not so much our
Yeah,
sphere. That ends up kind of like
that's not right. But then, like, let's say my daughter's high school teachers who would write an essay in there that would blow out of the park, blow my, be like
yeah
way superior than what I wrote, but they don't belong to the shul and they're not writing.
mm,
Like, there are certain cultural normative things in the Jewish world where that would not be culturally normative for a woman to be submitting a piece on a Torah piece in a journal.
right
That's
yeah
just a fact. Why is it that way? We can discuss why, but I think it's really interesting. So for my shul and the world that I was in, I felt completely comfortable, and that other like-minded women should feel completely comfortable. Am I trying to change or convince the Rebbitzin, who teaches high school in Mizei Kodesh, that she should write something? No, because it's just there are different outlooks on this, and there are different worlds.
yeah and I think like for okay, multiple hashkafic reasons why women wouldn't feel comfortable publishing in a journal like that, but I feel like there should be another avenue where she can share her Torah with
Yes.
other women. Yeah, for sure.
Can I
Um,
tell you something so interesting?
yeah.
I wrote for a journal years ago. It was called Klal Perspectives. That was on hashkafic issues. That was Moish Bain, who used to be the head of the OU. But anyway, I wrote a piece because I had written this article I had mentioned on Rabbi Adlerstein's Cross Currents, sorry. And it was about the transition from learning to working post-cola life, because we experienced that. And that was like, it
Mm,
went viral. People weren't really talking about that at the time. And then they invited me to write in this Torah journal with like very chashuv people, but I was the only one in this journal who wrote for that.
the only woman
Why
even.
am I mentioning only woman? Yeah, I was the only woman. Um, I don't remember why I mentioned it to you, but yeah, I guess I had some reason. But yeah, I mean, I have had that experience of being like the one voice, the one female voice. I do think it's a point. Oh yeah, I remember why. After that, some woman reached out to me, and she lives in like Ramat Eshkol
Mm,
in the Haredi community, and they had this beautiful Torah journal published by, admittedly, probably for women, by women. It was a high level Torah journal that they had created in their community. And I thought that was just really beautiful. Like their voices are being heard and with their own sensitivities,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I love that. I think that's amazing. Um, maybe like one more thing I'll talk about is like you were saying how like the teachers in your daughter's high school, like the big rabbit sends, right? Who are like they've learned like on a very high level. They've learned all areas
Yes.
of Torah, and they're like extremely knowledgeable. And it's sort of like we could sort of say that, and there is sort of like a basis, by the way, within halacha for that idea of like yechidei segula, right? Like individual woman who chooses on her own to learn. Like we sort of open up
Mm.
more of the boundaries of what Torah is accessible to her, as opposed to like the average woman would want to just make everything accessible to everybody. People could misuse the information. Like there is that concept. I guess my question is like, what's the path? Like if let's say you have a daughter, right, who is the super like motivated and intellectually curious girl. Like what's her path to get to that point of like being that super knowledgeable Rebbitzin, you know?
So interesting. So somebody once asked her about learning after seminary, having covers as continuing, and her response was like, "What are you talking about? Like, this is normal. This is what was normal in seminary, and like anybody who's teaching Torah is going to continue to be learning Torah on a high level." And
Mm,
that's what she was saying. Is like she wants to be a teacher. So as a teacher, of course I'm going to continue this. This is normal, and this is what I need to do. I want, so certainly I see any girl going into chinuch as this being the path forward. I guess the question then that begs to be raised is someone who's not planning on going to teaching as a profession, but still finds satisfaction in high level Torah learning. Like, is there a model for her, right? Like to continue that
Right, right.
as an adult? And I think like, I think, I think we need more, I think that we need more opportunities. Like, I think that's what you're saying. Like, yes, a woman can do that in her own home and create her own schedule of learning and her own priorities. The question is if that's enough, if that's sustainable enough, or if she needs more community support, more, organizations, more opportunities that can reinforce that for her and provide other opportunities. I would imagine that people who are really dedicated may continue to have whatever chavrusa it is, but I think like it's almost this notion of having the model of in your mind of the role model of the woman who does continue her learning as being normative. Like that's something that we need to do is like let's try to move away from like the notion of like the woman who's just fulfilling all her other responsibilities and doesn't have time to learn. Like how can we create this as the normative standard that this is what we all are striving to do? Maybe hard, but this is what it means to be a Jewish woman is continuing our connection to Torah in a more formal way.
Yeah. Yeah. So one more question I'll ask you before we move into our final closing questions. So, I was listening to this podcast with Rebbitzin Esty Hamilton, which I'm really hoping I'm going to get her to come on a podcast here. She's super busy, so she hasn't been able to have time yet, but I hope I can get her on. But she was talking about, there's this podcast episode with Halacha Headlines. I don't know if you've heard this one. It's called Should Every Community Have a Rebbitzin? I highly recommend it. It was fascinating to me. And they were asking her about this idea of like sort of women taking formal roles of leadership in a community, like a Rebbitzin role. And she actually is very passionate about like not just women taking formal roles, but actually like using a title, like even just using the title Rebbitzin, like actually calling themselves Rebbitzin. And it's funny because she actually really shifted my perspective on this because I personally was always like, I don't really need a title, whatever. I'm just Hadassah, it's fine. And I still do just go by Hadassah. But what she was saying was that like when you give yourself the title Rebbitzin, you basically send a message to the women in your community that you are a resource for like Torah guidance and insight and education, and like women can go to you for that as a resource. And like anyone who's a rabbi like met people in the community know like we can go to the rabbi. He is the leader. He's a spiritual leader of this community. And I feel like for a woman to know that a woman is that, and she was saying there's so many women who can share and who can lead and give in some way. And unless you're like a teacher in a school where like the girls in your school are going to, like you were saying, your daughter, like okay, they're going to their teachers and asking to have learn with them. So there's sort of this like that gives them a formal role, but like on a communal level, she was talking about the importance of like women in the community taking that like formal leadership role and sending a message that they're here for the women in the community in that way.
Does she give any other examples of titles besides Rebbitzin?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
The thing is of course I agree with the premise that we need women who are in designated positions to be available to other women, because the bottom line is, let's just talk about the Rebbitzin figure. Many women are Rebbitzins because their husbands decide to become rabbis, and are not trained in any formal way, didn't necessarily even choose this for themselves, may not have the personality traits, the ability to inspire or mentor, and they just happen to be the representatives of the community. And this is a huge issue because so many women do not have mentors and do not have formal mentors. So I'm assuming SD was saying that like it's important to have people with some type of title so you know who to go to, right?
Yeah.
Like there's someone designated in your community. There are a few tricky things. So is she suggesting that like someone who's a mentor type could then just call herself a Rebbitzin, even if, what is a Rebbitzin? You're married to a rabbi.
What is a rabbi?
I'm assuming that's how you
rabbi, because they have that role. Like, what does the word rabbi mean? like, okay, smicha, but not a...
Well, rabbi typically means, right, so there's nothing, so you've achieved a certain level of training, education, qualification to be a rabbi.
Right.
So Rebbitzin, right? So a rabba may indicate that you've achieved, or a mara might indicate that you've achieved a certain level of, right? But without, like, those are titles that indicate qualification. Rebbitzin is, because I'm assuming because your husband's rabbi. I'm curious, do you know if she suggested that if a woman's a mentor, she should just call herself Rebbitzin,
Yeah,
even
she
if
was
she's
saying
not?
like it should be an independent title, not just because you're married to a rabbi. Like it just like a
Okay, so
woman who's not like because she is she's in that role. She was also advocating for like communities hiring women for these roles formally, like giving them a formal position. Like it shouldn't just be because you're married to a rabbi, that's why you're the rebbitzin, but there should be women even if their husband's a doctor, right? They could still be a rebbitzin.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know.
I'll give a shout out.
Yeah.
I want to shout out CORE here, run by
Yeah.
Elisa Bulow. I'm like a founding board member of CORE.
Amazing.
And CORE was founded because of this particular issue that we see in communities across the world. This really, I want to call it a desperate need for women to have a connection to mentors in their communities that they can reach out to, because just you cannot count on her calling the rabbi all the time. It's just not the role. She needs a female mentor. And so CORE has a training program called the MMC training program. It's a 2-year training program. They're working to get it actually accredited, but it's the MMC Mentor Mashpia Counselor. That's the term that they've created, but it is with training, with supervision,
and that is
it's
a qualification.
Right. Yeah, it really is a qualification. I mean, I might not have masters at the end of it, you know what I mean? But they're also looking to create a master's equivalent type of program where they are really in training to be a mentor, and also to know when to refer out. Like when we're talking about mentor, you're having women who are calling you for often very serious issues that they're dealing with in their homes or in their personal lives, that they need often professional guidance, that maybe the mentor rebbitzin is going to help her to a certain extent, but they need to know how and who to refer to. So that's another feature of this program that I love. It's creating resources and connecting these mentors and training them in how to refer out to get women and help them get the advice and the guidance that they need to deal with whatever their issues are. So yes, huge need. And I'm so grateful to CORE has impacted thousands of women already and creating this opportunity for women. So yeah, need it. Absolutely. Big fan.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Closing questions. One is, can you share a Torah thought that you can't unlearn, something that like really shifted your perspective about yourself, about the world, something you want to share with everyone?
That is such a beautiful question. First of all, I just want to acknowledge what a special question that is. Very simple thought. I definitely heard this in high school and it has never left me. This midrash that before a baby is born, the malach taps the baby underneath the nose, and that's the reason why we have that little spot underneath our nose, to forget all of the Torah that it was taught in the womb by Hashem, and that it's our lifelong journey and avoda to relearn, to rediscover all of that Torah learning that's like in our neshama that we've forgotten. The Malach made us forget, but it's there, it's embedded in us. And that idea has always inspired me. I've thought about this since I was a young girl and my own journey of Torah learning and religious growth, and fulfilling my potential, which was a term that I heard N.T. Swy drilled in me, is that like it's there. And not only is it there, it's like a personal, your connection to Torah and to Hashem is personal. Like you learned it in the womb, like Hashem taught it to you. And also the idea is, when you learn something that you're like it's just like, it's like, aha, like, it's just like, it totally resonates, it like gets you excited, like you like love an idea. Like those are the moments that like you are remembering, like it's coming back out, you're remembering the Torah that was taught in the womb, that it's really like inside of your neshama. So I just love that idea, because I think that if we could think of our own relationships with Torah learning and our relationships in our, with our avodas Hashem as remembering what we once always knew, there's just such a depth and, a depth to that Torah learning is just so much deeper than learning any other academic pursuit.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, anything else you learn is like, adding more information onto yourself, but like Torah is like discovering yourself, like what was already.
Yeah, it's like at some point it was already internalized within ourselves.
Very cool. I love that.
Hmm.
Okay,
Thank
and
you for asking
final.
that.
What was that?
I said thank you for asking that question. It's something great to think about.
Yeah, and then okay, final question. Do you have a learning suggestion for something like an underrated learning suggestion, something that people might not even know about, or like they might know about it, but they like think it's totally not for them, but you think that they might love?
Yeah. Okay. I've talked about this now 3 times on this podcast.
Okay, no problem.
I'm gonna do another plug for Naomi.
Yeah,
I
yeah, totally.
I've talked about Naomi even with my seminary experience when I used to go and love it, and then the other girls would come down in their pajamas. I'd be like, "Oh, we're learning
Yeah,
Naomi, like get
you're a
into it."
Noth girl. You love it. Okay.
Yes. And I think the Naomi program from the OU just like, and no one's paying me to say this from the Women's Initiative, but just like it proves to people like you may think, what is this esoteric? What do I need to learn this part of Jewish? Like, of anything that I would pick up now, I would be picking up Parsha. I would be picking up some like Machshava. I would not think to pick up Nach.
Hmm.
And like the fact that so many women are picking it up and just loving it, I think is like so telling. So I would suggest like maybe pick up something that Daska, something that you think is like less relevant or a little
Hmm.
esoteric
Yeah.
or a little too heavy on the Jewish history. And like, it may be exactly the thing that's going to speak to you at that moment in your life.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great takeaway. I love that. Yeah, by the way, throughout this entire episode, as you're talking in my head, I'm like, I need to go check out Naomi. Like, I've heard about it before, but I never like jumped on the bandwagon, and I'm like, I should probably start doing that. So it totally worked.
And the sponsors for this episode, the OU Women's Initiative, Naomi
I'll reach out to them.
was joking.
Amazing. Alex, thank you so much for making the time. This was so fun to chat, honestly, and we should do it more often, not on record.
Thank you.
Um, and yeah, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was a pleasure.